Alright, final trip on the way into Chicago. This is out from Milwaukee a good ways, probably about 2 hours. And you start to see real scenery differences finally after day 2, which includes a lot of green on this particular day. A lot of the skyline is overcast, almost making me feel like I'm heading back into Seattle, except of course everything is flat. But massive green fields, beautiful landscape as you're coming into Milwaukee. At this time too, we were making pretty good speed. Full track speed, 79 miles per hour, which converges on 80 miles per hour quite regularly. As we get through this landscape, which for some, I'd always noticed when I lived down south, like this type of landscape looks a little desolate sometimes. So even though you have a green, you have a lot of trees that are without leaves, etc. as you're coming in. And as you get closer into Chicago, you really start to notice because it's infused with the brown of trees scattered throughout the landscape, etc. And the brown, or at least I call it the brown of urban build out, etc. As we get closer, though, you get a lot of the infused green yards of Chicago. Beautiful little neighborhoods and stuff. It's really great. One of the things about Chicago that I often say and point out is that this is one of the it seems to be these days that Chicago is totally underrated. It's a way better city than a lot of people seem to think it is. It's amazing. You got city amenities, urban amenities. You got pretty great transit. You got the elevated in the city. You got the commuter trains that spiral out of the city to different suburban locations up to like 50 or 60 miles away in some cases. A lot of options for really, really good quality of life. And it's pretty inexpensive compared to most of the cities with these types of amenities. As we roll along, you can see the Chicago skyline over there and the Sears Tower, etc. starting to poke out. Right here, the commuter rail is Metra, and this is one of the big rail yards that we cut through on our way into the city. A lot of the engines you can see, etc. And then the double-decker galley cars. They still got a ton of those. They haven't replaced them yet. Those things are like 50 years ago old, 60 years old, something like that. Pretty wild how old they are. But they're still in great shape. They renovate them every few, a decade or two or whatever. So it's not like they're all ratty and torn up inside or anything. They're nice cars. So whenever you're riding a commuter train, you get a seat. Unlike some of the kind of hot trains back in the Northeast where you may or may not get a seat sometimes. But in Chicago, if you're riding the commuter trains, you usually get a seat on most of them. As we get a little closer into the city, you notice we start slowing a little bit. And on the Empire Builder, at least, I don't know about the other trains, some of the other trains seem to, in my experience, zip into the city a little bit quicker, but the Empire Builder seems to slow to about 30 miles per hour, this many miles out, which I think we're about 3 or 4 miles out, and it stays at about 20 or 30 miles per hour for the rest of the way into the city, just kind of poking along. In this particular case, we pass one Metra train right here on its way out. And this is a common thing because the Amtrak station is a station that is shared with the Metra trains. There's many Metra trains though, and there are multiple other train stations where the Metra trains are the sole train in and out of those stations. But with the Amtrak station, there's a few shared Metra trains that cut in and out of there too. So as we pull in, this is basically your view. The last few blocks into the station, you're basically in the city, on the city streets, on a train, in a train. So you're looking out onto the streets just like you would if you were in a car, except you're up on the second floor of a Superliner car, looking down on the cars and such. And right here we've stopped waiting to get into the station because there is a train traffic jam. That's something that you don't hear about a lot in the US. And there goes another Metra train leaving. And once this one leaves, they actually let us into the station. Doesn't look like an excessively busy train. Not a whole lot of people on it today. I've heard that since the pandemic, ridership on the commuter rails have kind of plummeted, but that tends to be the case in most places. And as you can see, there's our last train, so we're pulling into the station, and that's our last glimmer of the city as we pull in. And that concrete wall you're looking at is basically the wall that's at water level along the rivers. As we pull in, that's basically where the train station deck is, where the trains are rolling back and forth on, is at the water level of the rivers, or close to it. Whereas when you're walking around in the city, you're usually 1, 2, 3, 4 stories above the river, looking down at the rivers, right? So that's how all of downtown Chicago is. And once you get into the station, you pull in, you detrain and head into the station, and there are these catacomb levels where you're walking in and out of the station, but you eventually walk up to the main room and the waiting rooms, etc. And then from there you go up more steps to actually get out to the street, and thus you're then, however many stories above the rivers. And at that point I have arrived. And the first thing I need to do is go stow my bike, because I don't want to walk around for my transfer period of an hour and something minutes with my bike. I just wanted to get out and kind of walk around the station and see what was up.
I just wanted to stow this because I'm in the Metra lounge.
So the attendant was real nice, got me hooked up pretty quick. So you just roll your bike in when you bring your bike. And then what I do in this particular case, because there's not really anything to lock it to, and they're kind of loosey-goosey about security. So what I did was I just pull out my U-lock and I lock it to the triangle of the back. With that all done, I head out into the world of Chicago. So you leave that area where the baggage is, where they're taking care of all that, and you go out this corridor, which goes out into the main grand station area. To the left is the first class lounge. More about that in the next episode.